Hi, I'm Marion, Landry, Technical Marketing Manager for Autodesk. This is a three-part video on depth of field. In this first part, I want to show you how to use depth of field while creating a still shot with hardware rendering. You'll find a wealth of information on depth of field for photographers online. If you're not familiar with the concept, you might want to familiarize yourself on how it works for photographers before you can translate this information into Showcase. In Showcase 2014, you'll find depth of field under the camera properties under the View menu. To do so, you'll have to expand the Show More control and activate depth of field. It will show immediately in the viewport. Now you'll need to adjust the focus of interest in order to fine-tune the depth of field. So first of all, you can choose the pivot point to be the center of interest or the area of focus. If you prefer to, you can choose an object to be the center of interest. So for example, if you choose the bench in front, you'll see that the background becomes off focus. In reverse, if you choose the staircase to be the center of interest, the bench will become off focus. For the purpose of this exercise, we'll select the bench which is closer to the viewer to be the center of interest. Remember to stop the click on an object action in order to adjust the focal distance and the f-stop. Even though you have selected the bench to be the center of interest, you can still fine-tune the focal distance and determine what is the distance of the focal point. Changing the f-stop will make the focus shallower or deeper depending on what you need. You can fine-tune the focal distance and the f-stop until you're satisfied about the result in the viewport. Now keep in mind that we're adjusting the viewport, so as you're moving or orbiting around your scene, the depth of field will be kept the same because we have adjusted the viewport. So you see here, as I am orbiting around, the depth of field is kept the same even though I am changing my camera view or my view angle. Now I have some shots here, and you can also notice that the depth of field gets carried away from shot to shot. Now there's a way to save a different depth of field per shot. And obviously, if you don't want depth of field in the viewport, you always have the option to turn it off. So unchecking the depth of field, now I don't have depth of field and I'm looking at all my shots that are saved and there's no longer depth of field. Now to save a different depth of field per shot, I'm going to have to turn it back on and load the properties of this particular shot. I'm going to have to check the use depth of field values and save it with this shot. So I'm going to check that box and make sure that you reset the position to make sure that you're saving this particular depth of field with this shot. Now if I move to shot number 2, again, the depth of field value gets carried away from one shot to the other because the second shot doesn't have the depth of field saved with the shot. So you see here I'm unchecking it and it's now gone for all the other shots, but it's still saved for the first shot. Because for this particular shot, the use depth of field of value and save it with this shot is turned on. Now let's fine-tune our depth of field for each shot. For example, for this particular shot, I still have depth of field turned on and I'm pretty happy with what it looks like. I'm going to load the property, check the use depth of field and save with this shot, and reset the position to lock it down with the shot. Moving on to the third shot, I still have depth of field that gets carried away, but for this particular shot, I'm going to fine-tune it a little bit and add a bit more blurriness in the background. So now I have a different depth of field value for this particular shot. So I'm going to make sure again that I use the depth of field and save it with this shot and reset the position. Moving on to the fourth shot, for this particular shot, perhaps I'm going to click on a different object. I'm going to make my focus this column here in the front, and I'm going to fine-tune my focal distance and slightly my f-stop as well. So now I have a completely different focal point, and I also have fine-tuned my depth of field. Again, I'm going to check on the depth of field and reset the position. Oh, something weird is happening. I'm trying to click on my fifth shot and it's not being activated. Well, I committed a mistake. I forgot to stop the action of picking an object and I confused the software. So I'm going to do that again because I totally screwed up here. But I wanted to keep that in the recording because most likely you'll enter into these problems again. So I repicked my colon as an object. I readjust the focal distance in f-stop. I'm going to reset the position to make sure that this particular depth of field is saved with my shot. And now I'm going to move on to the fifth shot. For the fifth shot, actually, I don't want this shot to have any depth of field. I want this shot to be clear all the way through. So I'm going to turn off depth of field so it's no longer active in the viewport, but I need to save that to make sure that every time I click on this shot, there is no depth of field. And for the final shot, I'm going to turn the depth of field back on, and this one I'm going to increase quite a bit. I'm going to click on the bench to be the object that is in focus, and I'm going to adjust the focal distance and f-stop. I'm going to make sure that I stop the picking object, reset the position, and save the depth of field per shot. So now you see that as I am clicking on each of the shot, you can identify that each of these shots use an individual depth of field with different values. And these values all have been saved within the shots. So I hope you'll be exploring with depth of field as it really had photorealism and interest into your shots.